Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttoknox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. knoxvilleflowerpot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, we talk with Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey about why he still lives in the town where he was born and raised, and what he likes to do when he's not working in the Tennessee state capitol.
Sunday afternoons, I get my little grandkids on my little side-by-side four-wheeler, and we go riding out, and we feed the cows, and we get an apple and feed it to the donkey, and we get corn and feed it to the ducks.
With more than 5 decades of beekeeping under his belt, this Maryville man is known as a bee expert. Meet the man behind the Smokey Mountain Honey Company.
I've never met a honey I didn't like.
And check out the golden goodness next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm your host, Vicki Lawson. Getting into politics wasn't ever a part of his plan, but Ron Ramsey's experiences from real estate to auctioneering eventually led him to the job of Lieutenant Governor. As he drove from his hometown of Blountville to Nashville, he stopped by our studios to share his stories about balancing personal drive and success while maintaining family and Tennessee roots. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tell me about where you grew up.
I grew up in northeast Tennessee, about 3 miles from Bristol Motor Speedway. That kind of gets everybody oriented there. Grew up on a little small farm there, milking cows, putting up hay, and still live about a mile and a half from that farm. And when I'm home and not in Nashville, I'm on it just about every day, so I stay close to my roots.
So you still live in Blountville?
Oh yeah, I live in Blountville. Again, we was talking about this. My family and I are very close. My mom lives within a mile of where we grew up. My brother does too, and one of my sisters does. We tease one of my sisters. She moved all the way to Abingdon, about 15 miles away. So obviously very family oriented. I have 3 grandsons now, another on the way. They live right in that area too. So nothing better this time of year than being home on weekends. They usually have auctions on Saturday, but Sunday afternoon, taking off with the grandkids and just playing on the farm. We have a ball.
Tell me more about your wife and your family.
Oh, baby, now you're talking. Last March 1st was my 35th wedding anniversary, and I get chill bumps when we start talking about it. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, man. My wife is the best person you could ever ask for. I mean, she is my soulmate, my best friend, my business partner, and I've already texted her twice today and hadn't been gone home but about an hour. And so she runs my business, and the best mother you'd ever want. We had 3 of the best daughters that anybody could ever ask for. They're 34, 32, and 30 years old now. And now I've got 3 grandsons, and you can't explain that. I just tell it you can't. Man, those little boogers, I can spend 24 hours a day with them. And so it's good. We all live close. We go to church together every Sunday. We used to sit on 1 pew. Now we take up about 3 pews. That's good. My mom goes to church with me. My brothers do. We just have a very close family, whether it's Christmas and just Easter. We're always at somebody's house, and that is what it's all about. It is. I mean, you could take away everything, take away the money, take away your business, take away your political career, but as long as you got your family, you got everything. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm the luckiest guy in the world when it comes to that.
With all that you do, how do you unwind?
Farm. I love it. I really do. I call it diesel therapy. You set me on my tractor and put me a set of earphones on to where the phone doesn't ring. Saturday I got out and got my weed eater, and I weed eated about an acre of ground. I have a 0-turn mower and I mowed, but I love farming. I've got 22 Angus cows, and I love putting up hay and just working on it. It's a lot better now. Used to you did it when you were growing up because you had to. Now you do it because you want to, and I could hire somebody to put up the hay if I wanted to, but that's part of it. And Sunday afternoons, I get my little grandkids on my little side-by-side four-wheeler, and we go riding out, and we feed the cows, and we get an apple and feed it to the donkey, and we get corn and feed it to the ducks, and man, that's how I unwind. I absolutely love that. I got, last Easter, we got my grandson 6 chickens, so I get 6 eggs a day. If you need any eggs, let me know. I cannot get rid of them fast enough, okay? And then this Easter, I drove down to Greene County and got them 3 rabbits. And so now I got three rabbits at the house. They all named their rabbits. It's hilarious. I love it. They sit there and play with them all the time. And that's what I do, just play with the grandkids and farm. That's how I unwind.
Right out of college, you started a small business. Tell me a little bit more about that.
You know, I've always thought I was going to be self-employed, never thought otherwise. But while I was in high school and in college, I always kind of had my own business then, raised a lot of tobacco, put up hay, had people working for me. And it's kind of comical that the only job interview I ever had in my life, that this was in May of 1978, getting ready to graduate from ETSU. And to start your own surveying business, get your license, you had to work for somebody for 2 years. That's an apprenticeship. So a fellow told me about somebody that was hiring. I went and talked to him, and I said, you know, I'd like to work for somebody for 2 years, long enough to get my license, and then going to start my own business. And I'll never forget him saying, that's a heck of a way to ask for a job, but that's exactly what I did. My license came in on a Saturday. I went on Monday morning and said I quit, and I started my own business. I was 22 years old at the time, worked through that. Well, I was 24 years old, 24 years old at that time. And then in 1986 is when I started my real estate company that I still own and operate every day, and it'll be 30 years next year, and I started when I was 30 years old. So again, I always knew I was going to be self-employed. I always knew I was going to work for myself, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Also, you got into auctioneering. Tell me how that happened.
Well, I got out of college and started, as I mentioned, started my own surveying business. And there's a couple of auction companies in particular, but one was Willis and Boyer in Johnson City. And I started doing a lot of surveying for them. You know, they'd have an estate, a 100-acre farm or whatever, and I'd go out and cut it up in 10-acre tracts, and they'd auction off. And they asked me, said, why don't you get your real estate license, help us on Saturday mornings, work the auction business, that you'd be good, you're personable. And so you've seen, if anybody's been to an auction, you got the auctioneer, they also have your ground men out there. So I got my real estate license and started helping them. And I kind of realized after a while that I was working out there all week and fighting the bees and snakes and ticks and briars and everything else in the surveying business. And they'd come in on Saturday morning and make a whole lot more money than I was working all week. So I said, I think I can learn to talk fast. And so I went to auction school in 1982 and continued to work for them for about 3 years until I started my own business. So it's just something I always wanted to do, and I absolutely love it. I took my class at Walter State Community College. It was 2 nights a week for 10 weeks, and 1982, because my daughter was just born, my first one. I drove back and forth, and I'll tell you, it was 60 miles. From my house to Walter State. I sold every light pole, every fence post, all along that way, just practicing.
Would you care to take just a moment and demonstrate your auctioneer skills for us?
I had a feeling you may ask me that. Okay, so let's just say we got this Saturday, I'll be selling a house and some personal property in Bristol. And so when we're just selling real estate, my brother usually does all the auctioneering. I'm the one working the ground. But when we have personal property, we take turns because you get kind of worn out. And so let's say we have this trunk right here that we're getting ready to sell. Hey, here we go. How did he give home? Got a trunk. Let's go with the boys. Hey, 100, give me $100. Then we're gone. Hey, 100, 100 a quarter, 100 a quarter. Now, hey, 100 a quarter, 100 high, no 75. 100 high goes to 175. Go sell it, boys. Hey, 100 high, go 175. Sold it your way for $150. That's what I do for a living every Saturday morning. I think that's what our founding fathers wanted. It was for us to have another job outside the legislature, live in the real world, live in the same laws that you passed, and that's what I have to do every day. I was at my auction Saturday, and a guy came up to me, and there's a business in Mountain City called Parkdale. It's a sewing factory, one of the few left around, and they were about to move out of Mountain City, and I worked for the Department of ECD and helped save those jobs up there, and a guy came up to me practically in tears. That's the only reason he came to my auction, was to say thank you for helping save my job. And you get kind of chill bumps thinking about that God puts you in a certain place to do the right thing, and when you can do that, it makes a difference.
You are in your 5th term as Speaker of the Senate. Did you always envision a career in politics?
Not even close, to say the least. I told you I grew up in a little small farm in Bluntville, and I always thought I'd be involved. But it seemed like whatever I got into, from the 5th grade 4-H club to the Bristol Association of Realtors, I became president. I guess people like my leadership style, or whatever you want to say on that. And so I went to Nashville really for the first time while the legislature was in session, but to Nashville a lot, of course, in 1992. My peers at the Bristol Association of Realtors elected me to be president of the Association of Realtors. As president, you go to Nashville to represent Bristol on what they call Realtors Day on the Hill. And there's a day on the Hill for everything. You know, nurses day on the Hill, architects day on the Hill, where they come to Nashville and meet with us and express their issues. And so I got my little marching orders from our lobbyist and went across the street from the Sheraton to the Legislative Plaza and met my state representative for the first time. Met my state senator for the first time. Ironically enough, I lived about 3 miles from my state representative, but didn't know him. I just was not involved in politics at all and never envisioned myself being involved in politics. And he and I sat there and talked for probably 15 or 20 minutes. I could have gotten my business done in about 2 minutes. But I just started picking his brain. How does this work? When do you come down here? Things of that nature. And walked around Legislative Plaza, walked around the Capitol. I said, you know, I may be interested in this one day. I actually told him that obviously wouldn't run against you, but if you ever decide not to run, let me know. Thinking this could be 5, 6 years from then, whatever. And little did I know that about 2 months later, this was in March, probably on Realtors Down the Hill. Filing deadline back then was May. We moved that up to April. And he called me about the end of May. I'm minding my own business, sitting in my real estate company. My wife's in there with me. And he said, Ron, he said, our state senator, Ruth Montgomery, had just come over from the Senate and told us she's not running again. And said, I'm going to run for the Senate. You better be ready to run for the House. You know, I said, man, I didn't mean that soon. He said, really? I'm sorry. He said, I've already called a newspaper reporter and told him you're running. I said, do what? And so about 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Rick Wagner, Bristol Herald Courier. And Rick said, I got to know him very well. First time I'd ever talked to a newspaper reporter at that time. And the phone rings, and he said, Ron, I heard you're running for state representative. I go, yeah. That's how I got involved in politics right there. By the way, then I had to go in the other office and say, Cindy, my wife, guess what? I'm running for state rep. We'd kind of talked about it, but literally we was thinking 4 years, 6 years from then. And so I just jumped in with both feet. You know, never run a campaign, didn't know anything about politics, just started learning, talking to people, and got elected. Had a very tough primary. I won by less than 200 votes. The general election that year had been relatively easy. And then, of course, again, as I started moving forward, 4 years later, 2 terms later, that's when Jimmy Quillen stepped down as congressman, and Jim Holcomb, our state senate, said, I'm going to run for Congress. And I said, I believe I'll run for Senate. And ran for Senate. Then in 99 became a committee chairman. 2002 became caucus chairman. 2004 became the majority leader. Again, just kept moving up. And it was a great day on January the 11th at 12:36 p.m. I even know the time. I was elected by my colleagues to be the first Republican lieutenant governor since the Civil War. There's only been 2 ever. A fellow named DeWitt Center served for 2 years. And I actually have his portrait in my office in Nashville, hanging on the wall. I look at every day to remind him that I am part of history. It's just old country boy from Bluntville. It's hard to imagine. What life experiences prepared you for the role of lieutenant governor? You know, I've often wondered that myself, trying to think back on that. I was very, very close to my 2 grandfathers. Granddad Ramsey farmed all his life, never had a job off the farm. My grandfather Carter, he farmed, but also had a small hardware store in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I think it is just, again, the work ethic. And both of my grandfathers were a lot alike in the fact that they didn't get upset either. I mean, we were getting ready to put up hay or something. It'd start raining. Granddad Ramsey would say, well, if it didn't rain, you wouldn't have any hay tomorrow. Just never get too high, never get too low. And so I guess that's what it is. My parents, of course, were close to them too. But I think back, my 2 grandfathers were probably the biggest influence on my life to teach you that work ethic. And Granddad Carter, that owned a hardware store, you talk about just a guy that could get along with anybody, and even when they didn't agree. So I think that's what plays into it. You know, you have served as lieutenant governor since 2007, working with 2 different governors, both Democrat and Republican, along with 3 different speakers of the House. Right. Do you have a philosophy or approach that you would like to take with you when you're trying to bring different personalities together? You know, just don't ever wear your feelings on your sleeve. Make sure that other people have good ideas too. They do. And if you disagree, really disagree agreeably. Don't be upset. Don't go stomping off, because in the end, you know, you got to work with them the next day too. So don't hold a chip on your shoulder. What are you most proud of accomplishing during your time as lieutenant governor? For me, as lieutenant governor and speaker of the Senate, it is more about setting a tone. It is more about just leading as opposed to individual pieces of legislation. I haven't carried an individual bill since 2006, I guess. I don't carry none. I'll have some I hand off to people. Just in Bristol, the things that you look back that would not have happened without you, the big Pinnacle development going in up there on the interstate where Bass Pro Shop is, that was because of a piece of legislation I carried. We just talked about up in Mountain City, that business that would have gone out of town if I hadn't helped get a little more money through ECD. So it's those kind of things, but it is more about a tone. And when I leave, whenever that may be, and you look back and you say, what difference did I make? It is just the fact that we've gone on an upward trajectory of fiscal conservatism and balancing the budget and just setting that tone that could be carried on to the next generation. It is about that.
What do you hope to accomplish next?
Who knows? I really don't know. I kind of take it one step at a time on that. You know, I will have finished 24 years and 10 years as speaker, 24 years in legislature, 10 years as speaker next year. I'll evaluate then what I'm going to do. You kind of take it one step at a time. I had a state representative one time not too long ago ask me, you still look forward to going to Nashville as much as you did 24 years ago on Monday mornings? You know, I answered him, I said, I'm not sure I ever look forward to going to Nashville on Monday morning and leaving your family and leaving your business, but you go because you think you're making a difference. You do. So it's as fun as it was 24 years ago, but I will admit my grandkids are growing up, and that's kind of tough. My daughters tease me because they say, Dad, when you go to Nashville now, you seem to miss the grandkids a lot more than you ever missed us. And maybe there's something to that, I don't know. We just take it one step at a time and just make sure you stay grounded and keep moving forward. My Nashville life is not my most important life. It's not. I mean, if you don't keep your priorities in order, you know, God and your faith first, and then your family second, and then politics third, or maybe even fourth behind my business. If you don't keep that in your gut, then you're going to have problems. And I've seen people that make politics number one, and they always end up in trouble.
What do you think is the best thing about living in Tennessee?
I think it's just the family values and the community and how we still get along and go to church on Sunday mornings and worry about our neighbors and try to take care of each other. It's all that right there. It is. We are still a very, you know, a southern hospitality kind of state. We are. And if a neighbor's spouse passes away, everybody takes food over to their house. If somebody has a problem, everybody pitches in. So I do think that's what it is. Other places aren't like that. You know, I saw my kids' classmates that moved to Atlanta or moved to Charlotte, no family. I couldn't imagine that. Could you make 30% more money by moving? Yeah, but that's not what's important in life. It isn't. So I do think what sets us apart, the reason I love Tennessee, is that still that we care about each other and we still try to take care of each other.
Well, Lieutenant Governor, thank you for sharing your Tennessee life and that you're so proud of the state and all you do for the entire state. And thank you again for
Thank
being
you.
our
Love
guest.
doing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on Tennessee Life, tickle your taste buds with some Tennessee honey.
It's that time of year when bees bring us the golden goodness of honey. One man in Maryville has been in the business of bees for more than 50 years. Howard Kerr is considered a bee expert, and he tells us why Tennessee is one of the best places to produce many varieties of honey.
Tennessee is probably one of the best places on the planet to keep bees, especially in East Tennessee. There's a fact that most people don't appreciate, that is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park has a greater diversity of plant species than any place on the planet, any other place, more so than the Amazon rainforest. My name's Howard Kerr and I live in Maryville, Tennessee, and I have a company called Smokey Mountain Honey Company, and I've been keeping these bees and operating this business for 51 years. When I was a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, my next door neighbor had a couple hives of bees, and they were in the field right beside my house, and And Mr. Hitch would come home from work every day. He would sit down on a log next to his beehives and watch them. And being a nosy little critter, I decided to go over and see what Mr. Hitch was doing. And I went over and said, "What are you looking at, Mr. Hitch?" And he said, "I'm watching my bees." And so he started showing me about carrying pollen, and then he'd open the hive and get some honey out and let me taste honey. And that sort of got me hooked on bees. And all my life I wanted to have bees. And so in 1965 I decided I'm going to have bees, and that's when I started keeping the bees. So I've been having them ever since. And started off, I wanted 2 hives of bees to make honey for my breakfast table. And 51 years later, I've been running a beehive business with up to 300 colonies of bees. There are those who say I'm the bee expert in the state of Tennessee. I won't defend that statement, but I've spent a lot of time teaching classes. I've taught beekeeping at the university. I've done research on honeybees at Oak Ridge. I've done a lot of bee diagnostics with microscopes looking for various problems with bees. And I still teach a lot of classes and give a lot of lectures on bees, and I've spoken at national and international meetings on bees. So if you're a beekeeper very long, you learn how to handle the bees so you don't get stung. I don't wear gloves. I always wear a veil. It's smart to wear a veil anytime. I don't care who it is. But I don't wear gloves. And one of the benefits of not wearing gloves is I can feel the frames, I can feel the hive. Now, if I mash a bee, it'll sting me just like it would sting anybody else. But you also learn a few tricks, like the smoker. I'll smoke my hands before I go into bees. I get some beeswax and handle it, and the bees will get on my hand and it smells like a beehive to them, so they just go on. This behind me is what I call one of my production yards. They sit here to produce honey, and they pollinate my garden. And I've got fruit trees in the front, fruit trees in the back, garden here, garden there, a lot of garden space. And these bees will pollinate those things, but they also make a lot of honey. I've got other bee yards on farms that are dual purpose. They're there to pollinate some crops and also to make some honey. These bees just came back from South Georgia. I moved them to South Georgia right after Thanksgiving. They go down to South Georgia because they get a honey flow startup down there earlier, and you can increase the number of colonies down there. And then when our flow is ready to start up here, which it did about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I moved the bees back here. The rest of the time the bees stay put where they're located, and I go there and take care of them, mow the bee yards, check them out, harvest the honey. We harvest the honey mainly in late June because we have to take the honey off here before we can pick these bees up and move them to the mountains. So we have the extracting room set up, cleaned up, get all the equipment. We take the honey off. We spend 2 days around the clock extracting honey. The most popular honey is clover honey by far, and it's sort of like mama's cooking. That's what we've produced in this area predominantly for years and years, and that's what most people around here have been accustomed to, and that's why they like it. But frankly, I've never met a honey I didn't like, so I eat all the honeys that we have. I have right now 6 tanks down there with different flavors of honey, depending on the floral source. And if you go through and taste each of those barrels of honey, you'll taste this totally different spectrum of flavors. Buying the honey is not the most important thing about honeybees. Honey is a very good sweetener and tastes very good, and I love honey very much. But what's important about bees is that they pollinate 8 out of 10 foods that we eat. Except for wind-pollinated crops like the grains, wheat, oats, and so forth, those the wind pollinate. Most of the crops we consume, honeybees have their nose stuck in the production of that fruit. If you have an apple tree with a beautiful bloom and a bee doesn't visit that apple bloom, you will not have an apple. And so, same things with cucumbers, squash, cantaloupes, watermelons, pumpkins, all the plants you grow in your garden. We've got 26,000 acres of home gardens in Tennessee. And if they don't have bees around, they don't produce much crop. One of the big concerns about beekeepers have now is what's called colony collapse disorder. You go out in October, you have a hive of bees that's absolutely bursting with bees, plenty of food, good to cover on, they're not going to get wet. You expect, and for decades, you go back in March and those bees are doing great. Well, now what happens, you go back in February or March to check on your bees and you open the hive and voila, no bees at all, it's empty. Got plenty of honey, dry inside. We really don't know what's causing it. Everybody's got their own conjecture as to what's causing it. I think my personal opinion is I think it's genetically based, but it's also the perfect storm of bad genetics situation, so we've been passing our breeder queens around so that our bees are more or less inbred now, and that's not good. We have a lot of pesticides. There's some neonicotinoid pesticides that are extremely toxic to honeybees, and they affect their nervous system in a way that I suspect when the bees are afflicted with that pesticide, they leave the hive to go out foraging, and it's sort of like an Alzheimer's person. They leave, but they can't remember where home is. I have customers that come from several counties here because a lot of the allergists who recommend people eat raw, local, unfiltered honey, and I have a reputation as having that honey, and I get people coming from 2 and 3, 4 counties away coming in here to buy honey. And they'll come in and buy 2 or 3 cases of honey and then come back a few months later and buy 2 or 3 cases more. It's my fishing and golfing all rolled into beekeeping. I can come out here and start working, and honestly, I can't tell you if I've been there an hour or 3 hours. I just get lost in time. It's so enjoyable for me to be out there and watch and see.
We hope you've enjoyed the stories we brought you on this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you next time.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttoknowknox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. knoxvilleflowerpot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.